Absolutely.
So if you do that, I'm gonna film this here for you.
You just tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready. You're on camera.
In the late 1990s, when Dyson was the hit in Europe, because remember, they're not here in America yet. When they were hit in Europe, the Hoover Company could stand it no more. But you have to understand that Mr. Dyson in the 1980s took his patents to the Hoover Company and showed it to them. And they said bags are best. Bags will always be best. They didn't want a bagless cleaner. Years later, the Hoover Company's executive in an interview with a British magazine said that they wish they had actually bought the technology from him when he brought his patents so that they could have quashed it and put it on a shelf and it would never have been used. Which really pissed James Dyson off, as well it should. He spent years inventing this technology. So anyway, once he brought out the Dyson vacuum cleaner in 1993, it was an almost instantaneous hit. And then he brought out the DCO2, the canister, which sits on stairs. It looks like the Phantom Lightning. What happened was, the Hoover Company couldn't take it because they were taking so much market share from them. They decided to copy it. They copied the dual cyclone Dyson, and they had it out for about 6 months before he sued them. But see, now Dyson was the most popular vacuum cleaner in Europe. They went almost overnight to having such popularity. So now he had enough money to pay lawyers to fight it in British court. After almost 9 months, the judge delivered the news to the Hoover Company that they had lost the patent infringement lawsuit and they owed him $3.5 million. On leaving the court after the judgment against the Hoover Company, Mr. Dyson picked up the then brand new DC-04 model and he held it above his head and he said, quote, this was on the London Times, this was the quote, "The Hoover Company wouldn't give it the time of day. They said bags are best. Bags will always be best." And then they copied it. And he's holding it up because a $3.5 million lawsuit against the largest vacuum cleaner manufacturer, in Europe, was significant. But it validated his point that he had invented it, and you couldn't buy that technology from anybody except a Dyson. Besides, the Hoover they invented was complete crap.
What model was it?
It was called the triple vortex. It was called the triple vortex. Here's how they claimed it was different. The Dyson goes, here's dual cyclone, from here to the bucket where it spins around. And then the air and dirt go to the cone-shaped one where it spins around. It then leaves the cone-shaped cyclone and goes down to the motor. What Hoover did right here, they reintroduced some of the air back to the high efficiency cyclone. So it was always a third of your suction was being lost, spinning the air again and again and again and again, relentlessly through the second cyclone. That's what the triple vortex, and they thought, well, because we spin it 3 times and he does it twice, we can get away with it. $3.5 million later, they found out they couldn't. It was a horrible vacuum and all the motors burned out. Talk about low suction. This had more suction than the Hoover triple vortex, but the triple vortex had a cord rewinder. I bought one, brand new in 1999. I had it shipped to me when they first came out from England. I turned it on and it smelled like a funeral home. Every time I used it, it smelled like a funeral home. It was horrible. This was a much better vacuum cleaner, which ain't saying a lot. But the DCO1, by the time Dyson got from 1984 to 1993, the machine had been improved tremendously, and he actually had electrostatic filtration before the motor, and electrostatic after. And eventually, the DCO1 HEPA would have a HEPA filter after the motor. So he was really trying, once they got into production, where they were actually selling machines, to make it as good as he could possibly make it. And it just really surprised him how overnight the company really took off. From 93 to 98, in 5 years, they became the largest manufacturer of vacuum cleaners in Europe. And today they're one of the largest manufacturers of vacuums in the world. Their output, think about Dyson's output today. They sell them everywhere in the world, every country, every single country. And his, the brushless motor technology used in the handbags was really unique. Nobody had ever thought of brushless motors except Rainbow. And that was only because of Don't get me started about rainbow. But anyway, that's the story of this. So we're gonna go ahead and start this machine again because it really kind of is a unique sound. The company called Zanussi in Italy is the one who manufactured this to Mr. Dyson's patents. And I don't know what motor they used in it, but it must have been an Italian motor because they were in Italy. Zanussi is now a company that puts their name on products from the Swedish Electrolux company. So they're no longer a manufacturer. And it's still brushing the carpet, you just don't really hear it. It's not a beating machine. But the carpets they have in England,
Cardboard hills.
well, there's no pad. They're not on a pad at all. The carpets lay on floors. They may be wall-to-wall carpets, but they lay on hardwood floors. And they're wool. The composition of the carpet is so different than what we have. They have no nylon carpets at all. This is why straight suction Henrys will clean them. So now you know a little bit more about the very first one. I walked into the Curry store, and there he was standing there. It said in the newspaper ad, "Come meet the man who invented the bagless vacuum cleaner." The man who invented the Rexair, which was the first bagless vacuum cleaner and that didn't lose suction. You know the Rexairs weren't supposed to use water. They were dual cyclone like the Dyson. And that was back in the early 1930s. So the man who invented that was dead. Has long been dead, so I went to see the corpse. I walk in and I said to him, I said, "Hello, I'm Tom Gaskell from America." He goes, "Hey, I'm Joy Dyson." And I said, "I collect vacuum cleaners." He goes, "Nobody collects vacuum cleaners." And then he showed me this machine, and I said, "Well, I like it." He said, "It's the first vacuum cleaner in the world that has no bag and no loss of suction." I said, "You mean other than the Rexair?" He said, "The Rexair." I said, "You know, the Rainbow." "What's a Rainbow?" He said. Well, they never sold them in England. He had no idea it existed. Why would he have ever seen a Rainbow? He wouldn't have. If he would have and had heard the story of how the Rainbow was invented, the Rexair is to be a vacuum cleaner with no bag and no loss of suction because Airway had the patent on the bag. So they wanted to eliminate it. Had he known that story, he would have never claimed this was the world's first. But he knows now because I sent him a Rainbow. You'll notice at my house tonight, you're going to see a lot of machines that are Dysons that you've never seen before and won't again. He made 250 Dyson canisters, DCO2s, out of recycled plastic, and it was called the Recyclone, and they're green. I have one. I'm going to plug it in tonight. There were 250 of them. How many do you think are still here? In fact, Mr. Dyson and I believe we're the only two people who still have one of these. Well, there wasn't that many, and there was no repair parts, and they were sold to be used. And of course, there were no repair parts. He has one at the factory in a glass case, and then I have this one. And I would have thought 30 years, almost 40 years later, how many of them existed that were ever used. Because if you think that bottle brush kept the dirt out of the motor, you're very wrong. That bottle brush didn't do anything but stop a couple of threads. So I really absolutely don't believe that there's more than, if there's his and mine, and there may be one or two more in the world, but certainly there can't be very many. Whoever bought it to use it. They bought it to clean their house. Well, and they broke. Look at the cheap plastic. It's cheap, cheap, cheap. You know, we complain about China all the time. The Chinese weren't the first people to invent cheap. A vacuum cleaner is worth whatever you pay to manufacture it. Well, he was paying to have this machine made by another company, so they were charging him out the ass. You know, in Japan, this vacuum cleaner was the equivalent of $2,000 in 1986. It was a status symbol in Japan. People bought them so you could see them, not because they actually vacuumed with them. And remember, it had a height adjuster and a metal bottom plate, so it had been improved from this one. So, yeah, that's the story of the Dyson. Oh, vacuum collecting. He said to me, "I've invented the most powerful vacuum cleaner ever made." So, I bought it. It was 200 British pounds, $300 American, $75 for the plane ticket to get it home. because that box, he had them boxed up with the handle in place. So think of the size of the box. The airline didn't know I was bringing this box home. So I got it home and I used it twice. And within 3 weeks. And he called me up and he said, and I quote, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, number one, it's not the most powerful vacuum cleaner I've ever seen." But you can see why. I said, "Number two, I wish you would put a bag in it because it took me so long to clean the machine after I was done cleaning the rug." And he said, and I quote, "If I put a bag in it, no one would buy it over a Hoover." And that's actually when I said it's, you know, not the most powerful vacuum cleaner I've ever seen. He said, "It doesn't matter." He said, "All that matters is that they can see the dirt spin because then they will believe." And see, what we're doing is you have to make someone believe that the dirt that they can see spinning is their filth. And the only thing that can get that filth out of the rug is something like this because you can see it. If you think about it, you know when you see a person vacuum their carpet with a rainbow and the water gets really dirty in about 5 minutes, you go, "Oh my God, look at that filth." There's probably 2 tablespoons of dirt in that water bin because it doesn't take much dirt to get water dirty. But your eye says, "Oh my God, look at this filth." And then of course when you're done, you pick up the dirty water basin and you say, "Oh my God." Cut open a vacuum bag and empty it onto a newspaper and you will have picked up a lot more dirt.
Yeah.
But you can't see it. I always thought that there was a vacuum bag manufacturer that made a clear strip that went down the disposable bag. So when you opened up the machine, you could actually see through the clear strip in the middle of the disposable bag how full it was. You would see it visually. They discontinued them, you know, a long time ago. But I thought that was always a good idea to be able to see the dirt because it gives you the visual effect of being able to see it without actually having to touch it.
You can do that with a
Because in this
TriStar
case,
bag.
we had to touch it.
TriStar bags, you can do that.
Well, TriStar bags are open at the top. The big problem with TriStar bags is the breathing of the dirt, getting it out of the vacuum, and then putting it in the trash can. Don't put any trash on top of it because all the dirt will come out the top of the bag, and you have dust coming out of your trash can. So I've always thought a closed bag that sealed the dirt inside the machine, like an Electrolux. Oh, hey, it was invented in 1952, and they stole it from Airway, who invented it in 37. I've always thought those 2 designs of disposable bags were the very best. You couldn't get the bag in an Airway wrong. You can't get the bag in an Electrolux wrong. Every other vacuum I've ever seen in the world, people have in fact gotten the bags in wrong. There was a Miele that I had not too long ago that she threw away the bag holder. Seriously, who knew the bag holder even came out? She threw it away and put a bag in it. She said something just wasn't right, but she closed the lid anyway and used it. And then a couple times, and then the red triangle came on, and that was it. $400 later, she bought a Perfect because So the fact is, getting the bags in wrong is problematic for almost every vacuum cleaner in the world except an Airway and an Electrolux. And I don't know any other machine that is so easy to change the bag. But of course the Electrolux was made for Minnie. The engineers built the Electrolux for Elizabeth, and not Elizabeth, for Miss Abeline and Miss Minnie, for the maids, because Electrolux was the most popular vacuum in the South. I mean, look at the movie The Help. There were 4 Electroluxes. One of them wasn't even made for 20 years.
I know.
Who has an Olympia in 1963? But the fact was, it was the most popular vacuum in the South, and the salesman had to go back to the house to fix it. Oh, yes, remember the career salesman, the Electrolux man in your town? Well, he'd go back and find out that Minnie didn't empty it. That's why there was no suction. Miss Elizabeth called him up and said, "There's no suction." He'd come back to find that nobody emptied it. So he spent his time emptying vacuum cleaners instead of selling. If you think about the Model 60, this machine was designed to be maid-proof. Literally, you couldn't get the bag in wrong. It threw the bag out of the machine. It always maintained its suction, and the maid couldn't tear it up. So Electrolux did a great job of copying the Airway. And I mean the Airway fire hydrant.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought this was an excellent vacuum cleaner, way too heavy, but I love how it shot the bag out of the machine. Many people think it shot the bag out of the machine, and it didn't because the motor was winding down once the front cover was open. Yes, the spring had pressure against the back of the bag, but the motor suction as it was winding down was still keeping the bag in until it very gently ejected the bag out of the machine. They don't just pop them out. So, in my opinion, that was always the best. And so, in my opinion, you get to something like this, and it's why? I mean, I bought the machine and I like Dysons, but really, why? You could just use a vacuum with a bag. They're not so expensive. Anyway, there's my story about the Dyson. Y'all got a chance to hear it.
What was the story with the Hoover?